I prepared this little presentation considering two factors. One is if you have a farm and you're not sure about doing tourism, to analyze that, what it means to do tourism. And then on the second part of the presentation, once you have decided what it takes to do it, how to do it, basically, we're going to cover some, yeah, the main concerns that usually people have regarding having a tourism activity in a farm. Loss of essence, which means that how much do you have to do something different to what you're doing? Sia has a neighbor that put a big swing, so that's kind of an extreme. If you want to like alter your environment to offer like activities, adventure activities, which my position is that is not necessary at all. You can do it if you want, but there's an audience for everything. But there's also a big audience for people who want things just as they are. They want nature. They want the most authentic and untouched experience. We're gonna go deeper into that. Then another concern that many people have is the work burden. How much extra work will you need to do? In general, my advice on that point is that you can work as much as you want because you can decide, for example, that you want to do a touristic activity once a week or once a month. You can really plan your activity according to your schedule. You don't need to adapt on a schedule. You don't need to open every day. You don't need to get unannounced people. You can have people to announce themselves. So it's good to keep in mind that your work burden really can be what you decide. You don't need to get out of control of your time if you decide to do tourism. And the third concern for many people is safety and privacy. How much unsafe you become if you are not anymore an anonymous place, only known by your friends, but also a place that is public. So we're gonna discuss more in detail these three concerns. Uh, Authenticity. Um, One thing that is good to know is that the trend in the world and also in Ecuador is towards authenticity. Probably 20 years ago, people there was a it was more alternative to have an authentic experience. The mainstream tourism was still more up there, and everybody wanted to do something, either rafting, either in those things that you rail, or on a giant swing. But every time more, the trend is to have authentic experiences. And the interesting thing is that that trend is also happening in Ecuador. It's not only in Europe or in North America. Here also, most people are, well, not most people, it still is the mainstream tourism that they want activities, but there is a growing number of people that want authentic things, meaning that you don't need to change a lot on what you do. Uh, One thing that is very important is to keep in mind that there's an audience for anything. So if you decide that you want to do rafting because you love rafting, okay, do rafting, and you will find an audience for that. But if you don't want to do rafting, you just want to have a river for people to see, you will find an audience for people who want a river to see. To see. The key here is the what I call easy targeting that is allowed by social media that unlike 10 or 20 years ago, makes it very easy to advertise and to promote what you have to the right people. Um, how through the keywords, through the language you use, you can tell social media to show your information exactly to the right people. So that makes it easier than ever that you can do exactly what you want to do. One very important thing is your story. We will talk in a little bit later about what structure you need and what structure you don't need. And I will make a big emphasis in what is your story, because that is most valuable thing. Yeah, and a final recommendation that I make is it's good to create a product, but not around what people want. No, it's good to stop thinking people will want this. For example, people will want rafting. The point is being authentic. People will appreciate your authenticity. People will appreciate your story. Um, Well, here I talk about what I already said. Safety and marketing is not a should not be a big concern because thanks to social media, you can direct your promotion if you decide to do promotion to to the people who will value your product. So if there is a band of attackers that are looking for a farm that where they might rob next, probably they won't receive that message. Because, for example, if Zia's farm is permaculture, so if she wants to create a campaign, she can make a video saying, explaining what she does, how her farm is, and the video is promoted, so it's targets exactly the people who are interested in permaculture, in eating healthy, in meditation, which very unlikely would be thieves. So that's a way, that's like a security valve that social media gives you. That the measure that you promote it to the right people, it's not very likely that people who are not like your audience will receive that message. And probably robbers or people who are interested in doing bad things, their interest in social media would be totally opposed to that, totally different to that. So in that sense, you are not making yourself too visible. You're making visible to the people you want to be. And the manageable workload. This is what I already said. That you can decide how much work you need to dedicate to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about my experience in tourism, because after this, we're going to the second stage of the presentation, which is once you decide that you want to do it, I'm going to give you some little tips on how to do it. So my main career in tourism has been writing. I'm basically a travel writer. So I have written a lot about community managed tourism. So my strength is rural tourism, with an emphasis on community managed. Uh, when I was in my 30s, I have a tour operator called Midnight Expeditions here, which was dedicated to do I used to have a circuit of 12 days throughout Ecuador, focusing on very like specific things. And my target was people who were interested in nature and culture. Then I moved to the United States, and I had a magazine in Miami which was about entertainment, nightlife, and art and music. And then I came back to Ecuador and I worked in several travel trade magazines until I decided to publish a magazine to the bigger public called Viajes magazine that was specialized in nature, natural and protected areas, and, and, and focused interest. Then I created a hotel in Guayaquil called El Manso. That from that place, that was like a hub of community and rural tourism in the Guayaquil area. I helped create a community managed circuit in the Gulf of Guayaquil, in the mangroves. It was a very big community protected uh, mangrove area, and we were bringing groups from Guayaquil, mainly international people were visiting Guayaquil, and then we have to stop that because of the security problems that began in Ecuador. And right now I'm writing two guides on community managed tourism in Ecuador, and I'm working in a project to develop a community managed project in Tumenuma, near Finca Sagrada, where I used to live for a couple of years. And I also have a service to help people who have farms and want to promote themselves, to help them how to do it. That's what I've been doing recently. So now we're in the second part of the presentation. I'm going to give you 5 insights that I hope that will help you know what you need to do in order to be able to say that you have a agritourism project. One is define your unique offer. Point number one, less is more. That's what I will always say. Probably the way your farm is now is how it should be. Making probably a little small adjustments that we will see later, but always keep in mind that less is more. Number two, it helps to have some structure We will see a few soon what kind of structure I mean. And number three, the most important part is your story. That you are able to tell a story to the people. There may be a language barrier because suppose that you decide that your audience is Ecuadorians and you don't speak Spanish. There are solutions for that, as we will see a little bit. Well, here I talk about the difference between a traveler and a tourist, and I talk about this global trend that is towards authenticity in the travel patterns, even in Ecuador.
What is the difference between a traveler and a tourist?
I define a tourist as people who want they have to do an activity. So they will either need a beach or a shopping mall or a rafting activity or something to do. Whereas what I call a traveler is someone who is interested in learning what they see.
Just they're willing to hang out and learn.
Yeah, just going there and learning from there and being there. Doesn't
Yeah.
You don't need to give them an activity
Yeah.
per se.
Yeah.
Well, the fact of being in Vilcabamba is what I call a natural filter, in the sense that people who choose to come here, not only from other countries but also Ecuadorians, they know what they're coming for. They could go to Montañita, they could go to Cuenca, they choose to come to Vilcabamba. So that means that they are interested in nature and they're probably interested in the expat community that is here. Not necessarily, but very likely they're interested in nature. So that means that probably you don't need to do that much in the farm. So about the concept that I presented earlier, less is more, I would like to make some specifications of this. For example, if you have a beautiful spot in your farm, that spot could be more beautiful if you put two hammocks, which is a minimum investment, but it makes a big difference. If you want to make a floor and put 20 hammocks, that's invasive. You don't need to do that because you don't want to have big groups. You don't need to have big groups. Probably the way to go is to attract smaller groups that will not interfere with the piece of your farm and will be happy with two hammocks. So try to find little enhancements that you can do in your property, but in that way. For example, if there's a river, if you find a bench, if you make a bench where people can sit and watch the river, that's a way to enhance the place without altering the natural setting. Here I talk about the theme parks or giant swings. You don't need theme parks or giant swings, but if you want to do them, and you will find an audience for them. The important thing is you have it very clear, and then you have a good alignment between what you offer and your audience. My personal recommendation, you probably know this, but I just need to say it, is that try to stay as close as doing what you love. If you say, okay, I'm going to do rafting because people will appreciate it, but I'm not into rafting, that's probably not the way to go. Seek among the things that you know and that you love to do, things that probably will have some pull in people, but you don't need to go out of your way because that's not authentic. Then something that I always recommend, I have had good experiences with this, is volunteers and interns. The difference is that, well, everybody knows what volunteers is. Interns is people from universities. There is a university in Loja that has student tourism, and they have to make hours in helping the tourism entrepreneurships. So that's a way to get labor without having to incur an additional costs. And those people probably they speak English and Spanish. So the easiest way to take advantage of their work is that they can be the ones to translate your story to the visitors that you bring in case you decide to attract Ecuadorian visitors and in case you don't speak Spanish. So the second way that an intern or a volunteer can help is through digital marketing. Digital marketing is a very inexpensive way to advertise. I remember 10, 20 years ago, when you wanted to promote something to a specific audience, you needed to find a target magazine and probably seek a classified ad, and you will end up paying $100 or $200 a month for a classified ad promoting what you have. Now, if you use Facebook or Instagram, you can spend $20 and reach probably to a bigger audience. The trick is that you need somebody who knows how to do this. And if you are not into social media, or if there's a generation gap between your age and the people who might see you, it's good to have these guys, volunteers and interns, so they do the work. Because this type of advertising is very cheap as long as you know how to do it. And it's not difficult to learn how to do it if you were born in this age of social media. So probably for those people who are in their 20s, it will be very easy. Uh,
Such a generational thing.
yeah, of course. So and then I talk about it pays to have to create some structure. My experience with volunteers and interns is that they don't value when you leave them too free. They like to have some structure. They value some structure because they will feel they are learning something. So, for example, when I used to have my hotel in Guayaquil, I had a welcome letter that will tell them everything they need to do when they come. Uh, I would make a procedure for their activities. All their activities will be registered in a document where they will be told how to do things. And at the beginning, I was reluctant to do that because I'm a free spirit. So I said, I don't want to go to a place where they tell me exactly what to do, like an office. But eventually, I discovered that 90% of volunteers they value that. They wanted to have a guide, to have a track in which they can go, and then you can tell them, feel free to innovate, feel free to put your personal footprint in this structure, but it helps to give them some structure. And another thing that is very important to know when you talk about especially volunteers is that there is a wide spectrum of ways to do it. In one stream, volunteers pay to be there. In the other extreme, you pay them. And in the middle, there is a formula in which nobody pays nobody. It's like a work exchange. So there are different platforms. Some of them specialize more in farms that will give them an educational experience and will charge them money. And then are the farms that are not interested in giving them an educational experience. They just want guys to work without having to pay them. So if that's your case, if you don't want to complicate your life in giving them educational experience, or if you don't have the background, or if you don't have the time, you can go for a work exchange in which they don't have to pay. They just barter hours for food and board, for room and board, and in the other extreme, to pay them, which is a formula that I discovered at the end, because in my hotel, I was not giving them an educational experience. I was just giving them a nice experience. So at the beginning, I had work exchange. I brought volunteers, and I didn't pay them. They didn't pay me. They would just do the work. But one day, I discovered that if I paid a little bit of money, like probably $20 a week, they will stay much longer, which is good because every time a volunteer leaves and comes a new one, you will need to spend some time in training them. So you want them to last more. So if you pay them something, usually their needs won't be that high because they don't have kids. And they're just young people who, if you give them $20 a week, they will be happy because they will have pocket money, and for sure they will have more loyalty and they will stay longer. Uh, but that's totally up to you. I'm just giving you the all the options that you have, and then uh, I made this little chart that is not very easy to see here, but I can share you this presentation if you're interested. But I made this chart in which I classify all the platforms and I explain how much you have to pay as a farm, how much you have to pay as a volunteer to access the farm, how much each platform is focused on farms or in general organizations, and how much each of these platforms are are focused on either students pay, volunteers pay, or you pay them. So this farm is a really good guide. It took me a little while to create it with the help of AI, but it's a good update of what's going on in the cyber world these days, which is the best way to get those people. One very simple platform, probably the most simple, is Facebook. There are some groups that are for volunteering. You find them through the keywords. You write voluntarios Ecuador, and you will get a couple of groups that which where you will mostly find Latin American volunteers. And there's also something that you need to decide if you want volunteers from Europe or the United States, or if you prefer Latin Americans. My experience when I used to have my hotel and when I managed the volunteer program in Finca Sagrada is that usually uh, volunteers from Europe and from North America, they're more committed to doing their things. They're more focused. Latin Americans are a little bit more loose. I'm not saying bad things about Latin America, but it's just a cultural difference. Here in Latin America, people are more lax in general. Uh, well, the second insight was consider getting volunteers or interns. The third insight is define your offer. Well, we talked about this earlier, time commitment. You have to define yourself and be clear with yourself how much time you want to dedicate with this, and that applies not only to visitors to the farm, but also applies to your volunteers, because volunteers, as Ian knows, they consume time. So the more you want them to pay, you will need to dedicate more time. If you're into a platform where you get volunteers who are willing to pay, they will expect much more time for you. They will expect, for example, that you give them classes of whatever knowledge you have, you can share with them. And it's good talking about the structure earlier that you have a very clear structure. You tell them, for example, every Thursday at from 9 to 11, I'm going to give you a class about this. So people usually like that. They feel more respect towards your place than if you give them that clear structure. Uh,
So it is a theme through all the insights, the structure.
yeah. Yeah, because I come from structureless. When I began on all this, I believe that the best structure is no structure, and then I began to incorporate some structure in my life, like the
Makes
minimum
things easier.
necessary. Yeah, glamping is another thing that I'm not deepening into in this presentation, but I'm just throwing the idea in case you want it, because you at some point you will need to decide if you want to make just for your visitors just a day experience in which they come to your farm, they have, for example, a half day experience and they leave. Then you can decide to make a full day experience in which you will need to provide them with food, and you will need to decide if you want to complicate your life giving them food or not. Always a good alternative is to have someone in your property, which could be a worker or a neighbor, and ask them to prepare the food. Probably they will be happy to do it and they will make some extra money if you don't want to do it yourself. And third is lodging. If you have spare rooms in your property, you can think about the possibility of letting people stay and sleep, which makes the experience much more beautiful for visitors because they will be there. Remember that probably your target will be people from the city who are stressed out. So the level of relax that they can get if they sleep there in your place will be much higher than if they just come for a day. But you have to keep in mind that it will be more investment from you and more time and dedication if you are having people to stay overnight. And this is where glamping comes. If you don't have rooms in your house, consider glamping. Consider buying a tent from Gopo and a tipi and letting people stay there. Or there are many options that right now that you can buy like pre-made houses. If you don't want to build something, you can get for probably 5,000 a dome, and people can sleep there, and you can probably people will see it not as a cheap place to sleep, but they will see it as an unusual and interesting place. That's what makes glamping attractive for people in the cities. Uh, Inside four is legalities, all the legal things that come into play in this. Um, the most basic um, thing that I recommend, so you don't get in trouble with the Ecuadorian IRS, which is called SRE, is to have a RIMPE. RIMPE is I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of a RUC. RUC is when you tell the tax company, the tax office, that you're gonna sell something. So they make a RUC number for you. And it's a document that allows you to make invoices. But that is too complicated. You don't want that. If you're a hotel, you will need to do that. But you're not a hotel, fortunately. So there's a more simple alternative that is called RIMPE, that the Ecuadorian tax office offers. That means that you pay a fixed amount every month, that it can be as low as $5 a month, and you tell them what that amount should be based on the number of based on the amount that you will invoice. If you say, for example, I will invoice less than $500 every month, you pay. I don't remember the numbers, but let's say that you pay $5 a month, and you don't need to report those invoices. You just get the RIMPE. You can get it online. Get the electronic invoicing. You don't need to print invoices because all invoices are electronic now in Ecuador, and you give that to the tourists. And in case you get busted by the tourism office or by the SRA, you can show that. And this is just a little price to pay, just to be more legal, in case they show up and begin to ask difficult questions. Then there is the Ministry of Tourism has a registry for farms who want to do tourism, but it's a very painful and complicated registry because they begin to ask you stupid things like suppose that you have rooms, that you need to have telephones in your rooms. In an age that everybody's using WhatsApp, they want you to have a telephone. So they're very outdated things that you have to do. So I don't recommend it unless you want to go big, where you probably need it because you will be famous, and the Ministry of Tourism eventually will come to check that you have all your papers enrolled. So that's about legality. And another thing is Airbnb. Airbnb is a way that the Ministry of Tourism a few years ago began to track people who are doing touristic activities. So it's not a good way to go, Airbnb. Besides, in Vilcabamba, there are more than 200 properties, so you will be competing with 200 places, and probably you will not be seen. My recommendation for promotion is always social media. Okay, so the last insight that we're going to see is this revolution that some people call targeted marketing, that is using social media to promote your offer. One that is very affordable. If you put $2 a day, that's a lot of money. You don't need to have to pay that much, but it's very cheap as long as you know how to do it. If you don't know how to do it, you can either learn it or know what you can do and get somebody to do it. If you don't want to work with volunteers or interns and you want to really work on your farm, you could consider hiring a part-time graduate from the tourism school in Loja. They will cost you $250 a month, and they will probably do a lot of things for you because there will be somebody in their 20s who are familiar with social media, and it won't be hard for them to teach them how to do these little campaigns. Hyper targeting, that makes it very easy to make campaigns because as long as you have it clear who's your audience and what interest your audience, you will be able to make a campaign and reach exactly those people. And that's one of the reasons I make an emphasis on your story, because if you don't want to, well, I think that's next slide. Well, this is important too. Decide if you want Ecuadorian visitors or foreign visitors. Keep in mind many things with Ecuadorian visitors. You will have a much higher volume because you can make your promotion, for example, in Loja. Loja is very close to here. There is a lot of people who are stressed out, want natural experiences. So you can get a more decent traffic if you target to Ecuadorians. If you don't speak Spanish, you will have to sort out the language barrier because it's very important to have communication with them, telling your story. And you can also attract foreign visitors, which the strategies are different. I still recommend social media with foreign visitors. There is a type of promotion that you can do in Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, where you tell the algorithm to find people who are usually based somewhere else and are temporarily in Ecuador. So that targets directly tourists, visitors from other countries. What is crucial that you decide what kind of audience you want to have. Well, that slide is missing, but there were, I don't know why I didn't put it, but there was a slide talking about your story. I'm encouraging you to, in case you are not an innate storyteller, probably your story will be more interesting than you think. And there are many different ways to put your story into the hands of your visitor. For example, if you don't want to just narrate your story to the visitors, you can think of a website. The website can tell your story for you if you want, and that will make your visit much more, the visit of your visitors much more interesting because they will be able to see you will refer them to your website, and they will decide if they want to come. That's an extra filter. The end goal is that you have only the right people, the ones who are interested in what you have to offer. So, yeah, that's my presentation.
To make it sound so easy. I really like that you kept emphasizing do less and, and talk about you and just be authentic. Very, very helpful. Lots of good information.
Thank you.